It was a beautiful winter afternoon. Fluttershy was at her cottage having some tea and just trying to relax while her friend Angel is sleeping on the couch next to her when she hears a knock on the door. She's not expecting any pony to be at her home this time, but not at least this court because they had arranged to have their regular tea party about next week. And her friends was actually quite busy that day, and so she wonders who can it have been. She opened the door, and there's no pony standing there, but in fact a deer. A deer by the name Willow Tree. Willow Tree and Fluttershy have been friends for quite some time. It was in fact she was introduced to Willow Tree by her friend Tree Hugger. Tree Hugger and Willow Tree have been friends for much longer than that she had known Tree Hugger. But she was actually very interested, very happy to meet Willow Tree for some while back, and they had instant connected as good friends. And he had been living in Manhattan for quite some time, and he decided to go to visit his friend Fluttershy. And since he had some time vacation from his work, and he was actually very happy to see her again. He had been being busy so much. She was really surprised to see him, because they had been sometimes even been running letters back and forward to each other for as often as they could. But now, seeing him standing by her door without even being noticed or even being informed that he was coming to Ponyville to visit her, she even asked him why he's even there. He explained that he's there for a visit, that he had been thinking about moving back to Ponyville. She was really surprised because he used to live in Ponyville about a few months ago before he moved to Manhattan. But she even offered him to come inside because not staying in the cold. While inside, she asked him why he decided to move back to Ponyville all of a sudden. Well, he didn't like much of living the big city life. After all, he was preferring to live in a small community like Ponyville. But after he had tried to get Manhattan a chance for at least a couple of months, but he preferred to move back to Ponyville. And after all, they had been friends, and he wanted to surprise her, and she was indeed, in fact, quite surprised. But then she asked him, when is he moving back? And he actually said that he's going to move back to Ponyville within the next couple of weeks. Just about 2 weeks before Hearts and Hoops Heartswarming Eve. And that really surprised her. And she asked him if he was hungry. And he said yes. He hasn't been eating much today. So she prepared some dinner, some lunch for them both, and they small talk about things what has been happening for him back in Manhattan for a couple of months. He explained that he had met a lot of new friends, but there were a lot of things that he didn't prefer to be in. Sometimes he can wake up middle of the night because of some ponies are been yelling at each other, or some of the traffics, like some of the taxis or someone who's yelling for, and that can happen sometimes middle of the night. And since he preferred sleeping at good at night, but since he moved to Manhattan, that has interrupted much of his sleep, and that has been affecting his work. But he tried to make it work as much as possible. But after 4 months of living in Manhattan, he had decided he had enough and he wanted to move back to Pullman. And for the past 2 weeks, he had been arranged to find a place in Ponyville that he could stay. And lucky enough, thanks to his friend Lyra, he had found a small apartment in downtown of Ponyville, which is big enough for him to stay in. And she was well surprised that he's actually moving back though. But he was actually very happy to be back. And he couldn't wait to be living back in Ponyville so he can finally get some well rested sleep at night. And even Fluttershy can admit that she do understand how it's like. Because sometimes maybe that when during the summer, some of the animals may wake her up and they need either comforting or food or anything that they can eat. So she is a quite experienced about being awake up in the middle of the night. So, but then she asked him, where is he staying if he hasn't even moved to Ponyville yet? Well, he's explained that he still lives in Manhattan, but since he's going to move back in a couple of weeks, he had decided to sell his apartment in Manhattan, and he sold most of his belongings since he didn't need them anymore. But he actually had been living in Twilight's castle for a couple of days now, and she was surprised about that because Twilight just never mentioned about that Willow Tree had been living in her castle. And the reason is why, because Twilight had made a pinky promise not to tell either Fluttershy or anyone else, because he wanted to be as a big secret. And after all, he actually arrived to the castle middle of the night, and Twilight was actually expecting that. And he hasn't been leaving castle at all until this morning. And no pony was expecting that. They thought he was just a regular visitor from outside town. But since both ponies actually had seen him before, but he tried to avoid as much of his old friends as much as he could, because he didn't want to have ponies talking about he is in town, especially for Fluttershy. After they had their lunch together, they decided to take a small walk through the forest. And since it was a beautiful day, Willow Tree actually enjoyed that. And after all, he doesn't even bother the winter at all. Since he has get used to the cold, and he didn't mind to take a walk with Fluttershy in the winter. They usually take long walks together in the winter before he moved. But on their walk though, there was something about Willow Tree that Fluttershy hadn't even noticed first. How quite handsome he was, even for being a deer. She really enjoyed his company. His makes a lot of things make sense to her. He can tell us a lot of things about himself. He has very outspoken personality. He can even tell some bad jokes, even makes her laugh. Even that there are two different personalities, but she cares about him, likes him very much. She even had asked him if he had found any pony to be with, or maybe another deer back in Manhattan. And he said that he tried to find some pony to be with. Even if it was a deer or a pony, but no luck at all. He even tried to go speed dating and even blind dates, but nothing had even worked out, not even after first one date. He wanted to just be with some pony that he really cares about. And she even asked who would have been, for instance, an example. Well, he did say as much first, but he smiled and laughed. Maybe it's someone like you, Fluttershy, he smiled. That surprised her and even made her blush, but she didn't even expect that he meant that he wanted to be with her. Maybe he meant someone like her as a personality, as kind, as generous as she is. And maybe that he will find someone like her, maybe, she thought to herself. Later that afternoon, though, Fluttershy told goodbye to Willow Tree when he went back into Ponyville because he needed to take care of some things to help Twilight with. And even when she went back home, she couldn't stop thinking about Willow Tree. After all, they had been known each other for some time, and in her mind, he's a very handsome, very honest, and even most of all, funny to be with. But there was something about him that she couldn't even put it at first. But she didn't pay much attention to that. But after some time, Willow Tree had moved into his small apartment in town, and the holiday was passed, and things between her and Willow Tree just normally just continue as friends. But over time, just after the beginning of the new year, Fluttershy has started to realize that she may have feelings for Willow Tree, but she wasn't even really for sure if it was from romantic feelings or if it was just friends feelings like that she used to have. She wanted to know for sure. So when she spent some time with him, she asked him by randomly if he would date her if he had the opportunity. He was very surprised on the most of that question, but he answered honestly that he would date her if he had the opportunity or maybe had even had chance to ask her or if she asked him. And he asked her why he asked about that, but she said just she was just curious because she never knows if you don't ask. And he agreed. Even after that meeting, though, only a couple of weeks later, when the winter was over and the spring had just started appearing, Twilight could meet with Fluttershy at the park sometimes. Even though when they spent some time, she did notice something was strange about Fluttershy, because sometimes when they were in the park, they could see that a willow tree was in the distance, maybe in the park or maybe walking by. When she saw that, she looks at her, she blushing, and almost like when she tried to talk to Fluttershy, it is like she didn't respond to any of her sentence. She didn't even listen. When Fluttershy just poked a little bit on Fluttershy, just in case to see if she has fallen asleep or something, Fluttershy immediately wakes up from her trance and looks and asks Twilight if something was wrong. But Fluttershy, are you okay? She asked her every time. And Fluttershy says yes, she was okay, that she just had fallen to fall deep thinking and deep thoughts. And that happened almost every single time when they were around, or maybe that when Willow Tree was nearby. At first, Twilight didn't had even noticed that Willow Tree was either in the park or maybe walking by in the distance, or if they even talk about him. At first, Twilight didn't even notice that much though, but after that this had recurred for several times, she started to pick up and notice that this might be some sort of pattern. But she didn't want to bother question Fluttershy in much because she didn't want to make her uncomfortable of any sort of question reliable to her friendship with Willow Tree. But he then had decided maybe it was time to do. She may thought about asking her Fluttershy if something was going on between her or Willow Tree. But when she did, she denied anything because she didn't even say that there was nothing in between them. They were just friends. But then Fluttershy was asked if she had any feelings for Willow Tree beyond more than just a friend. Fluttershy tried to avoid that question, but she realized she could not avoid this question as for long. So she admitted that she had a crush on Willow Tree. She would just happen the ability, the chance, or could even bring out to ask her or ask him about this. So Twilight didn't bother to ask more about it because she didn't want to force her to answer some of the questions. But later, sometime after all, Twilight was were talking to Willow Tree at the market when she, by accident, brought up topic about Fluttershy, and he then asked if something was wrong with her because for quite some time she seems to have almost been avoiding him. That surprised even Twilight because no, she hasn't even been avoiding you. I'm and he asked, what do you mean? She hasn't avoided me, then what is the cause of her avoiding me then, if she isn't that? Fluttershy, well, I can't even say. I mean, I made a pinky promise not to reveal anything. And Willow Tree realized that if he wanted to have some answers, he had to go to talk to Fluttershy to himself. So he decided to go to her cottage the same next day to say he had to get some answers. Even though he had a hope maybe get some answers, but he was even prepared maybe that he couldn't get any answer at all. But when he went there, she was surprised that he was even there in the first place. Because they had even been arranged a meeting or had even had arranged so that they would spend some time. But he then asked her straightly, Fluttershy, is there something wrong between us? You hadn't even spent much time with us between me and us for some time now. And I really want to know for sure. Is there something wrong? Have I done something or said something bad? He asked. At first, Fluttershy shook her head and said, No, you haven't. But then why hasn't it that you have even talked to me for some time? You almost like avoid me on purpose. Why? You can tell me anything. But Fluttershy didn't want to tell. At first, she didn't say that nothing was wrong, that just she had been busy. But you haven't been busy. Sometimes when I talk to Twilight or some of my other friends, you always walk in a different direction before I can even say hi to you. So, what is there wrong with me? Is it something I had done or said? But she said no again. But please tell me, Fluttershy. I want to know. If I had even hurt you in any way, please, I wanted to know. And even at first, Fluttershy didn't know what to say. And then she decided to tell him. And that really shocked him. Wait, all of this time you have avoided me is because you have a crush on me? And Fluttershy just nodded without saying anything. Huh, so that is why the reason. But Fluttershy, you could have told me. I wouldn't have rejected you at all because. And then he revealed a secret. Ever since he saw her for the very first time when Tree Hugger introduced them together, he had immediately fallen in love with her, without realizing it until now. And she wasn't not expecting that. Fluttershy and Willow Tree was standing there by the door of the cottage silently, because they didn't know what to say. But then both started to laugh, and they realized how things like this could be silly and even somehow ridiculous. But they started talking about more about this, and even after some time, they decided to be dating. In fact, already the same day, or the next day, Willow Tree took with Fluttershy to a park in town to have a picnic. And it didn't take long enough for her friends and family to realize she had been dating Willow Tree. But her family and friends were really supportive. Even Twilight was the very first one to be informed. Even though the Fluttershy was talking one day with Rainbow, asking her if she really want to be with Willow Tree, and she said yes. After all, Willow Tree has been treating her so much kindness over the past time. He has always been there for her, in the bad times, in the good times, and even though that he can make her laugh, even for some very stupid, boring jokes, even from that simple bad jokes, can always make her happy. And he realized that. Even that he had been told that sometimes he makes bad jokes, but seeing her that she laughs about them, even that she realized she do understand what they're meaning, and it makes her still laugh though. She had just realized they were meant to be with each other. And after they had been dating for about nearly 3 months, 3 years, Willow Tree had decided he wanted to be with her. After all, they were meant so much together. They spent so much together. They had so many things in common. And he can even cheer her up when he had a very bad moment. Even though there was one problem at first, she had to talk to Discord. Even though the Discord hadn't accepted Willow Tree as a friend, but he wanted to make sure that Willow Tree would not harm or hurt Fluttershy in any way, like breaking her heart or anything. But Discord, after some small talk with Willow Tree, accepted he said that, and that he was very, very serious. Even though that Willow Tree was a little bit scared at first when he met Discord at least 3 years earlier, but after that Discord and Willow Tree had become very good friends. And when he proposed to Fluttershy, she said yes immediately. She didn't expect that he would even propose to her so soon, but she nevertheless was really happy. They even had their wedding at Sweet Apple Acres, and it was a great time. Willow Tree had been asked Discord to be his best man, and Fluttershy had asked Rarity to be her bridesmaid. And even after the wedding itself, they actually went to a tropical island for a whole week, which that Twilight had arranged for them. And barely 3 years later, Fluttershy and Tree and even Willow Tree had been talking about starting a family, but they wasn't even sure if they was able to have a family of their own. So they had asked Twilight to be if she can maybe figure out if it was possible. And she said it was possible, but was rare to be happy that a pony could have a child with their, or perhaps even a griffin. But they decided to at least try. And after about a year, they announced a big news. They were expecting a baby, but when they told it was not a one baby, but two twins. And they asked, what kind? Both laughed and said, pony deer hybrids. Good daughters, in fact, said Willow Tree. And both of them couldn't have been more happier. And then the day came when the daughter was born. And they were like the mother, could both talk to animals, which surprised even the mother. They expect maybe one of them would have the ability to talk to animals, but both. That was a very rare gift. But Willow Tree and Fluttershy was really happy to be married with the one they loved the most. If it were that, if there wasn't for Tree Hugger had introduced them years earlier, Willow Tree may never have found his true love within Fluttershy, and Fluttershy would never have found her true love her too. Even for that, they both of them could not have been happier to have been found their true love that loved them most. And for Willow Tree, he was really feeling happy and lucky to have found his true soulmate. And that's how Fluttershy and Willow Tree found their true love, got a big family together. The end.